So Larissa, what were your focus standards that you wanted to teach this unit?
Well, because it's an integrated unit, we're really focusing on three main writing standards, and that's W2, which is writing expository,
Right.
writing to explain. W4, which is your process standard, using the writing process to produce a clear and coherent piece of writing. W5, which is about editing and revising, as well as incorporating literature standards because we're writing about what we've read.
Right.
So we're looking at RL1, which is using textual evidence to support analysis or argument within writing.
Okay.
RL6, which is looking at author's word choice and
Right.
the choices that authors make to make their text more interesting.
And how that word choice affects the meaning
Of the text, absolutely. And then R7, which is direct students to look at similarities between multiple texts.
Right. And synthesizing multiple
Texts
texts
into
sort
some coherent, yes.
of analysis.
Analysis, exactly.
That RL6 really encompasses all of the figurative language,
Yes.
and looking at imagery and looking at diction and word choice.
And how those things add depth and meaning
Right.
to a work of literature, and part of that discussion then becomes, why does an author choose to use those things in their writing?
So in your teams, as an 8th grade team, I imagine you unpacked those standards and you sort of came up with some essential goals or objectives that you communicated to your students. What were some of those?
One of the main things that we communicated to our students is that we wanted them to look at the text that we had read and gain an understanding of why authors made the choices they made as far as the figurative language that was used within this text, and what they perceived those choices added to the meaning and the level of depth and understanding
Right.
of that particular text.
So once you come up with those key objectives, what assessment did you make?
We adapted the prompt from the CCGPS Unit 2 Framework Planner, and we created a prompt page that asks students to look at the three main texts that we had read within that section of the unit. A poem by Alice Walker, Before You Knew You Owned It, as well as a short story, Everyday Use.
Right.
And then the short story, Everything That Rises Must Converge by Flannery O'Connor.
So now, just so the audience knows, this can be downloaded or to your computer from our webpage, and you should see it on the Prezi. Can you just sort of identify where in the prompt you embedded those objectives? So how this prompt assessed what you wanted your students to know.
Okay. The prompt directs students to look at the figurative language and imagery used by each writer and how that figurative language and imagery affected the readers.
So first they have to identify it,
Identify it,
And then
evaluate it,
evaluate it.
paraphrase examples of figurative language, and talk about and analyze really why they think the author used it and
Right.
how the idea expressed with the figurative language made the work more powerful.
Okay.
Basically, gave the work more meaning.
Why the author used it and how it gave the work more meaning or affected the meaning.
Exactly.
And I think that second step is really important. I think a lot of time we get frustrated with helping students just identify.
Yes.
And we don't always take the time needed to really go into the why does he use
Yeah.
it. And it sounds like you spent a lot of time on that.
We did. We sort of used steps in a process to lead them to being able to write for this prompt and being able to read a piece of literature, identify the figurative language, and then think about and eventually write about why an author made that choice, why that figurative language adds layers of depth to the meaning of the characters or the plot or whatever's happening in that particular work of literature.
When did you give them this prompt?
We dissected the prompt at the beginning. We showed them the prompt. I have a smart board in my classroom, so I put it up there. And we dissected the prompt and went over the parts so that students would know from the beginning that we're reading these three works to examine the figurative language and the imagery and how that figurative language and imagery affected the text itself and the reader.
So the students knew ahead of time, before they even started reading, what they were going to be expected to do with it.
Yes.
So it really made those goals you had clear to them before they even started doing the work. It also gave them a purpose, right?
Yes.
They knew that when they're reading, they're going to be expected to take this text and do something with it.
Yes.
That's a very
We're not just
effective.
reading it for
Right.
the sake of reading it.
Right.
We're reading it with a design purpose. We have not to use the sports metaphor, but coaches never go into a game without a game plan.
Right.
We have a game plan. This is our end goal. This is how we're going to win the game. We're going to be able to write on this prompt effectively. And in order to do that, we have to read these things and analyze and identify and understand the choices that were made regarding the figurative language within these three texts.
Okay. So next, we're going to look at some of the processes you went through in taking them from reading and analyzing and trying to teach them how to think about the text.
Yes.